Hi, and welcome to Canterbury Cottage. Christmas is my absolute favorite time of the year, so I am so excited to be sharing some new Christmas DIYs with you today. These are all easy and budget friendly, using inexpensive supplies and free things from your yard and the trash. I can't wait to show you what I've come up with. So let's get started.
For this first project, you'll need a piece of cardstock or poster board. Roll it up into a cone and use a little hot glue to hold it in shape. Cut a straight line along the bottom so that the cone will be level when standing upright. Then you'll need 4 or 5 empty soda cans. Use a can opener to cut off the top of each can. Then, using a pair of scissors, cut down the side of the can and then cut off the angled portion at the top of the can, and finally cut off the bottom of the can so that you are left with one straight piece of metal. Now you can start cutting out simple, small leaf shapes from your sheet of metal. I just cut them out as quickly as I could, not worrying about creating uniform shape or size. After I had a small pile of metal leaves, I began adhering them, starting at the top of the cone. I used a drop of hot glue at the top end of each leaf. With each consecutive row, I would adhere the leaves in the gaps between the leaves in the previous row. I attached all the leaves with the printed side underneath, but if you had a bunch of colorful cans, it might be interesting to see how they would look on the outside. I wasn't really sure how I wanted to finish these off. I didn't like the silver look, so I took them outside and gave them a coat of gold metallic spray paint. I didn't really like that either, so then I went over it with some gold craft paint that I had. I decided to add some sparkly tube confetti to the outside of my trees. I mixed a couple different colors together, and then I brushed Mod Podge over the leaves and sprinkled it on top. The confetti is very lightweight, so it adheres nicely to the metal leaves. As a finishing touch, I sprinkled on a little iridescent glitter to one tree and some gold glitter to the other. If you've watched my channel before, then you probably already know that I love repurposing old clocks from the thrift store. To turn this wall clock into Christmas decor, first I removed the back of the clock, and then I removed the clock face. I painted both the inside and the outside of the clock frame with some black latex paint that I had on hand. I gave it 2 coats of paint, and when the paint was dry, I used a utility knife to scrape off any paint that had gotten onto the glass cover. Then I used my Cricut machine to cut out this Christmas silhouette on a piece of black poster board. If you don't have a cutting machine, you could just print out the silhouette on a piece of white paper or poster board to get a similar effect. I carefully removed the battery pack and the clock hands from the clock face and saved them for a different project. To conceal the hole in the middle of the clock face, I cut a circle out of a piece of foam board, but I could have used a piece of poster board and it would have worked just as well. I used glue stick on the back of my Christmas silhouette and then adhered it to the piece of foam board. I should have cut out a deeper bottom edge to my Christmas silhouette when I was working in the Cricut design space, so it was necessary to cut another piece of poster board to cover the bottom of the Christmas scene. Then I sprayed the scene with some adhesive spray and sprinkled on some iridescent glitter. You can skip this step if you are not a fan of glitter. I poured enough fake buffalo snow into the clock frame to cover the bottom portion of the Christmas scene. I put in the round piece of foam board and then the clock face, which I reattached to the frame. And finally, I put the back of the clock in place and reattached it. For this next project, you'll need the clear ornaments that split down the middle. I found mine at Hobby Lobby. Cut out a circle or scalloped circle from scrapbook paper in a size that is just a little bit larger than the size of your ornament. Then print out some vintage Christmas images or use old Christmas cards. Then trace around your ornament and cut the images into circles to fit on the back of your ornament. To create a 3D effect, print out a duplicate image and then just cut out a few select objects from that image. Apply a good amount of hot glue to the back of your cutout images and then just carefully and lightly press them over the top of their matching image on the round cutout. Apply glue stick to the back of your round image and then adhere it to your scalloped circle. Put a little fake snow in the center of your round image. Then apply clear Gorilla Glue to the outer edge of your ornament. Align the ornament with the outer edge of your round image and press in place. Add some ribbon or a hook to the top of your ornament.
Let me take just a minute to tell you about an app that I am loving. The Fetch app is absolutely free, and it's a super easy way to earn rewards on literally anything you buy.
You just scan your receipts. The process only takes a few seconds. You don't have to worry about where the receipt is from or what is on it. I earned extra rewards on this receipt because I happened to buy specific partner brands. You can also click the e-receipt function to get rewarded for online shopping. The app automatically scans your email or Amazon account and finds rewards for you. Reward points can be redeemed for gift cards to hundreds of retailers like Barnes & Noble, eBay, TJ Maxx, and restaurants like Olive Garden and Panera, to name just a few.
If you'd like to start earning rewards, click on the link in the description box and use the code COTTAGE, and Fetch will give my viewers an additional 5,000 reward points when you scan your first receipt.
I recently collected some pine cones from my yard and wanted to see if I could turn them white by soaking them in bleach. I made a mixture of half water, half bleach, and let the pine cones soak for 2 days. Then I rinsed them off in water because I thought the bleach might cause the pine cones to deteriorate over time. I made 2 batches. The first batch I laid out on an old towel and let them air dry over the course of a couple days. The second batch I dried out in the oven, set at 150 degrees Fahrenheit for about 2 hours. I don't recommend putting them in the oven though. Even at that low temperature, the heat slightly toasted them so that the air-dried ones came out much whiter. I'll be using these bleached pine cones in a project later in the video. For this candle stand project, you'll need a piece of 4x4 timber cut into 3 pieces, each of a different length. You'll also need to print out some vintage Christmas sheet music or use pages taken from an old hymnal. Cut each piece of sheet music so that it is just slightly larger than one side of your pillar. Apply Mod Podge to one side of the pillar and to the back of one piece of sheet music, and then adhere the music to the side of the pillar, smoothing out any wrinkles. After you have covered all 4 sides of your pillars, let the Mod Podge dry for a few hours. Use sandpaper to remove any extra paper at the top and bottom of the pillar and along the 4 edges. I mixed a little antiquing wax in with a little bit of Mod Podge and brushed this over the edges to give it a more aged look. Then I applied Mod Podge to the sheet music on all 4 sides of the pillar. I had an old candle stand that I had thrifted some time ago, and I decided to take it apart and use the candle plates on top of my pillars. The candle plate had a little knob on the bottom, so I marked the center of the top of each of my pillars and drilled a hole just large enough for that knob to fit inside. I put a little Gorilla Glue inside the hole and then attached the candle plate. I wanted to see if I could make a snowman using a few spindles from an old magazine rack. I picked up a bag of wood shapes at Hobby Lobby so I would have something to use for the base and for the head. For each snowman, I drilled a hole in the center of a block and in the center of a wood ball. I filled the holes with some wood glue and then adhered the block and the ball to either end of one of my spindles. While the wood glue dried, I went ahead and painted all 3 wood pieces with a couple coats of white chalk paint. When the paint was dry, I lightly distressed the spindle and the block. I cut a small strip off of a thrift store scarf and tied it around the top of the spindle. To make this project easier, you could use the styrofoam snowman heads that are in with the Walmart miniature ornaments, but I just wanted to use his hat. To create a stocking hat for a different snowman, I cut one of the frayed end pieces off of my scarf and glued it around the top of my wood ball. Then I used a piece of thread to gather my frayed ends together and tied it in a knot. Then I glued a small piece of Chanel pipe cleaner around the bottom edge. I painted a small wood star with some orange chalk paint, and then I cut it apart to create carrot noses, which I glued in the middle of each wood ball. I used a black paint pen to dot on eyes and a mouth, and a pink highlighter to create rosy cheeks. To create arms, I drilled small holes on either side of the spindle just below the scarf, added some super glue, and inserted some small sticks from my yard. For something a little different, I decided to add buttons to the block at the bottom. Have you seen the cute little yarn trees at Walmart this year? Unfortunately, they only come in white or pink, so I decided to make some of my own. I cut my yarn into strips of 3 or 4 inches long. Then I began tying them onto a skinny dowel rod or a skewer stick. I tied each yarn strand in a knot onto the stick before adding the next strand, keeping them pushed together as closely as possible. To make the trees thicker, every once in a while I added additional strands, just tying the yarn over the strands that were already there. Once I had enough yarn tied to my skewer stick to reach my desired height, I began trimming the yarn into the shape of a tree. You want to cut away quite a bit of the yarn so that the tree is full and fluffy. You could just put your stick in a piece of styrofoam like the Walmart trees, but I decided to use a slice of tree branch. So I drilled a hole in the center, added a little hot glue, and inserted my skewer stick. Here's another project using old spindles. I cut my spindle in half. I drilled a hole in the top of my spindle and in the middle of a small wood ball. I put a drop of super glue into both holes. Then I put either end of a small craft stick into the holes to connect the wood ball to the spindle. To conceal the joint, I hot glued a small piece of metal ribbon around the top of the spindle just under the wood ball. Then, to create wings, I hot glued the stems of two of my bleached pine cones to the back of the spindle a couple inches below the wood ball. To make sure that the wings stayed firmly attached, I added more hot glue and a small piece of burlap over the pinecone stems. Then I added some embellishments from Dollar Tree. I used super glue to attach a wood ring on top of the wood ball and to attach a wood cutout star to the front of the spindle. For a base, I used an old candle stand, drilling a hole through the center and attaching the spindle with a long screw. Some of you might remember that last year I made a snowflake-shaped ornament out of sticks. This year I wanted to see if I could make a big snowflake to hang on the wall. I cut 8 large sticks to about 10 inches long. I would have liked to have had a 20-inch long stick to go down the center, but none of the sticks in my yard that were that long were straight enough. I arranged the sticks in a snowflake pattern and then hot glued them together. To reinforce the joints, I cut a small square of fabric and then pressed it into the hot glue so that it overlapped the end of each stick. Then I added some additional strips of fabric over that for extra reinforcement. I flipped the snowflake over, and on the opposite side, I just applied the strips of fabric going from one stick to the other. The fabric alone probably would have been enough reinforcement, but for extra measure, I wrapped some twine around the center of the snowflake. I added some small sticks to the end of each of the large sticks. I alternated between creating a simple cross shape and a V shape at the end of each stick. I used florist wire to attach 2 faux greenery stems that I had purchased at Walmart to the center of the snowflake. For something rustic and a little different, I decided to hot glue on a few of those wood flowers from Dollar Tree. Then I applied some spray adhesive to my sticks and sprinkled on some fake snow. I attached a bow with some florist wire, creating an extra loop of wire in the back so that I could easily hang my stick snowflake. I collected and cut way more sticks than I needed for that snowflake, so I decided to see what else I could make from sticks. I cut 3 sticks to the exact same length and then hot glued them together in the shape of a triangle. I tied a little twine around the 3 joints for reinforcement. Recently, a sweet viewer named Yozola sent me some pages taken from a vintage gardening book with beautiful bird images. I cut one bird image out and then used glue stick to adhere it to a piece of thin cardboard. Then I glued a piece of cardstock to the back of the cardboard. Then I cut very close to the bird image, about 1/8 of an inch out, and cut through all 3 layers. Next, I hot glued this now sturdy bird image to one of the sticks on the side of the triangle. I decided to hot glue a piece of vintage sheet music to the back of the stick triangle. I used a utility knife to cut off the extra paper around the 3 sticks. Then I added a little more hot glue along the 2 sides, but not along the bottom. I added some faux greenery stems, small pine cones, and some white pip berries, sticking them in the opposite corner across from the bird. Because I used real vintage sheet music, the paper was fragile, so I cut a triangle out of a piece of cardstock and glued it over the back of the sheet music to give it some reinforcement. I think there is just something so charming about little letter beads, so I used super glue to spell out the word peace, which I glued to the stick below the bird. I brushed on some of that antiquing wax mixed with Mod Podge so the beads weren't quite so white, and then I tied a piece of twine to the top for hanging purposes. I still had a pile of thick sticks, so I decided to turn them into a shelf sitter. I tied them together tightly with a piece of twine, wrapping it around a couple times. Then I added some hot glue in between the sticks to adhere them together and to keep them from moving around. Then I stuck some faux greenery stems under the twine on the top of the stick stack. I used the little clip on the bottom of a bird ornament to attach it to the twine. I added some red berries for color, and I also glued some berries to the bird's beak. Thank you so very much for watching today, and if you'd like more Christmas decor ideas, please consider subscribing.